I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters, and I particularly acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Ngunnawal Kamalio custodian Archie Allen, Three Rivers, and I'd ask you to try and pick out the Murrumbidgee. I was absolutely thrilled to find this piece of artwork. I have long been a person who collects some artwork, and I have worked with First Nations people for a long time. Pick out the mighty Murrumbidgee. Richie Allen shows the Murrumbidgee as a big water. It's an important, strong part of the landscape, so I guess you've picked which one it is. It appears there are places in his artwork where everything's connected, and I think that's important, and there are meeting places and places for yarning. And I propose to talk about the governance and partnerships, and I recognise that governance and partnerships have been part of this landscape for millennium through First Nations. I've been looking forward to today so I can make some connections. In my role, for me, connections are absolutely critical. I know some of you. I hope by the end of the day I've met all of you, so that as the chair, any issues you might have, you can raise through UMCN or you can come to me directly. Okay, Andy has mentioned here the governance issues around this particular area. I just want to mention here if you like, give you a feeling for bigness. And one of the things is Murrumbidgee in Wiradjuri means big water. And so here, the bigness of it to me is captured by the aerial view. And also, I think Andy captured a fair few things that this depicts, which is the place of the Upper Murrumbidgee in the broader landscape, and then also in terms of governance. And one of the things that moved me, and I've had many fabulous roles, but one of the roles I had was as Sustainability Commissioner, and I felt very guilty when I read what I'm about to share with you, which is a letter that the Murrumbidgee wrote to Canberrans. And the reason I feel guilty is on my watch as Commissioner, some of the things that were happening in the Upper Murrumbidgee were not obvious to me. So this particular letter that the Murrumbidgee wrote to all Canberrans, and it had a ghostwriter in the name of Andy Lowes, but let's actually go on the journey of the river. And this is what this letter says. So I thank the mighty Murrumbidgee for speaking out. I certainly heard, and I've certainly changed some of the agenda on the Catchment group so that we all hear and try and progress things a bit better. And the letter, well, I'm going to let you, I'm having a big fat thumb moment. Okay, enjoy this. This letter starts off, and for those of you who have read it, I'm sure you don't mind me sharing again parts of it. I'm writing this letter as a record of what has been an unusual and remarkable year for me and the people of the region. I've seen a lot in my life, but the last year or so certainly one for the books. I started December 2019 looking up to the grand old Brindabellas covered in snow. It was a cold one to start the summer indeed, but a chill that was soon to be replaced by oppressive heat, gusting warm winds and bushfire. I invite you to feel what you felt like back then and what this river must feel like. 3 consecutive hot and dry years had baked the country dry. In the middle of December, I finally stopped flowing. As we geared towards Christmas, water was trucked into the township of Thawa, and the cod, yellowbelly and crayfish, which rely on my water, took refuge in the remaining stagnant pools to wait the return of flowing water. What an optimistic entity our river is. Next. And it continued on. January 2020 was not a pleasant one for me or the region. But 1 week in January was a real shocker. I'm, of course, referring to the week from Monday the 20th to Monday the 27th. On the 20th of January, I watched as a powerful storm rolled in from the northwest and dropped a belting hail all over the city. For those watching from a distance, it was spectacular. And for some of us, like me, underneath, it was absolutely terrifying. By nightfall on Monday the 27th, the Aurora Valley bushfire would be just starting to consume the McMurrumbidgee National Park. For me, this was the saddest part of the year as I watched 80% of the national park and the animals within it destroyed. Next. The return of the rains was celebrated, but this joy was a mixed blessing. February saw the coming of the first decent rain for a while, and boy, did the countryside need it. I'll never complain of the rain coming down, but the first rains after a fire are not pleasant. I was now getting a dose of what Canberra had been breathing in all summer. My waters turned as black as Guinness, with ash and burnt timber washing into my body and filling my throat and lungs. I'm not sure if it's possible to have varying shades of black, but in Feb 2020, the Gudgeonbury, just upstream of Tharwa, turned a shade of black I'll never forget. While it was not pleasant, the return of running water was just what I needed after a long, hot and dry spell. And thankfully, it was a sign of things to come. Again, note the optimism in this river. Next. In the letter, the river reflects on its history, saying it's seen a lot, from watching how first people lived as one with the landscape through to seeing and feeling the effects of the early European occupation to being aware of the development of nearby suburbs. It shares how important it is from a recreation perspective, and it shares particularly how important it was in COVID when people flocked there. Finally, it gently makes a call for help. It says, I'm a little anxious for what the future holds. I don't know how you feel, but if I were the river and this had happened to me, I think I'd feel more than a little anxious. And it says, some of my close friends who I know are in this room met at Murrumbidgee earlier that year to check on how it's going. Unfortunately, it found out it's not as healthy as it should be. So that visit to the doctor wasn't good. And I do wonder about what the future has in store. What does the warming climate mean for the waters in its riverbed? What will Snowy 2.0 do? I don't know, but as I have done for years, I'll patiently sit by and find out. I may need a few more of you to keep an eye out for me. Well, the river's friends have responded to its cry, and this includes many of you, and it certainly includes me. This letter for me was powerful, and I know we've all been helping in many ways, and there's a symbol up here that I think is really important in progressing things. And this symbol's about using our head, heart, and hands. For me, that is really, really important. So this letter triggered for me something in my heart, and I do use my hands, and I'm definitely using my head in my role as the chair of this group. So governance, next one. So governance and partnerships, as Andy said, they're a heck of a lot, and I'm not going to outline what they are. They're complex, there's formal and informal. Essentially, my vision of this is this massive web of governance stuff and partnerships right across the entire Upper Murrumbidgee catchment. And one of the entities in that is the thing I have the honour of chairing, which is this Catchment Coordination Group. And this group's a governance structure, and it's absolutely there to foster partnerships, and it provides a forum for raising and working cooperatively with some of the most senior people who can affect the Upper Murrumbidgee in this region. I will say that they have to address wicked water and catchment problems. There's nothing easy in this space. Next, please. Okay, so the group, it's established under legislation, and it reports to the ACT Minister for Water, who's also the Minister for Energy and Emission Reductions. Now, really importantly, and Andy mentioned this, Minister Rattenbury is on the Murray-Darling Basin Ministerial Council. So And on the 15th of next month, we're taking him on a field trip, and I know some of you are helping me on that field trip brief him. So here's a very personal way of connecting directly with the bigger issues, and I know Minister Rattenbury is very interested. And as I said, it consists this group of the senior executives of these various bodies. And on the right-hand side, and you can read it, what do we do? One of the key things is we try and focus on governance and work collaboratively. The group also developed a ACT and region strategy. It's a very high-level document, but it provides a framework for our activities. Thank you. And this one is the strategic plan of UMCN, and importantly, it shows that what Andy was talking about, all the various members are absolutely connected with this catchment group. And I think that partnership is an incredibly powerful one. Next, thanks. The strategy, and I won't go into details, has 5 themes. And we have, I think it's 17 different focus areas, and we only have 4 meetings a year for 3 hours. So one of our big challenges is, what do we focus on? Next, thanks. And what did we do in 21-22? Well, I made sure we learnt a lot about the Upper Murrumbidgee. And we learnt a lot in terms of its health, its policies and plans that affect it. We made sure we funded UMCN, and we also called for change when we could through putting in a submission to the New South Wales Natural Resources Commission. And that particular submission on the water sharing plan related to things like the minimum low base flow conditions, native fish populations, and the water quality. And improving the Upper Murrumbidgee's health requires addressing many issues, including finding an answer, I think, to a fundamental wicked problem, and that is how to generate renewable hydro energy and have a sustainable river. To this end, our submission to the Natural Resource Commission did call on a review in terms of some of the content in the Snowy Water licence. And so we try to work in a very constructive way and recognise that history sometimes hands us things that was done with great good intent, but later on with the moment in time need to be changed. Next, thanks. In terms of 22-23, our priorities continue much like what we were doing last year. One of the things, though, that will be occurring that didn't occur last year is there's going to be a catchment-wide assessment of vulnerability to climate change, primarily done through EPSDD. The other thing we've done this year is we made a submission on the draft Southeast and Tablelands Regional Plan, and we called for better management of inland waters, to be given prominence in there. We also call for commitments to integrated catchment management planning, sustainable planning, ensuring water quality and security is for people and for the environment, because often those terms are used relative to what comes out of the pipe in our houses rather than what's out in nature. Thank you. Now, in terms of concluding, I just want to keep on emphasising the importance of sustainability and thinking sustainably. And this image shows the work of Wiradjuri artist Jordana Angus, representing the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by Australia as one of 193 nations that really did agree to trying to be more sustainable. It emphasises the importance of connections, understanding and using connections, I think, whether it's physical, in natural systems, or in communities, or in governance and management practice, is central to improving the Upper Murrumbidgee's health and sustainability. Furthermore, the partnerships from the western boundary is important, and governance is on the eastern boundary. And I don't know whether she did this quite consciously, but they appear to hold all the other SDGs firmly together. Partnerships and governance, I believe, are the bookends for action to achieve sustainability. And so I take my role as the chair of the coordination group very seriously, and I do believe that we need to consider what we do as bookends to everything people in this room do. So now to the future. I'm going to leave you with two thoughts. And the first one, you've probably heard part of it many a time. The future's not a place we're going, it's something we're creating. I'd ask you to think about what's not often shared in that quote, which is the second part. The pathways are not to be found but made, and the activity of making them changes both the maker and the destination. And I think that's really important, that we're going to be changed by what we're about to do, and we'll change, hopefully, the Upper Murrumbidgee for the better, but it will change us. And then this Margaret Mead saying, which is often contested, but I think it's spot on. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. She says, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So let's hope for us collectively that maybe when the history of our moment in time comes, that we can be looked back at as the collective, not as individuals, but as the collective, that we're able to make a difference to the Upper Murrumbidgee. And I think we need absolutely to focus on using our head, hearts and hands. And in fact, I've got a wonderful 2-year-old grandson that I play head and shoulders, knees and toes. You've all done that. Well, mine's head and hearts and hands. Let's go, let's go. So maybe if you've got grandkids too, you might change the tone of or the rhythm of that song to capture head, heart and hands. Thanks for listening to me. I'm going to have to duck out so that I don't have to contend with a parking officer, but I will be back, and I'd love to hear whatever you think the Catchment Group should be doing. Thanks very much.